This is Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. Brought to you by Vladi Meško-Brestinska and Nectarios Lolios. So,
Yeah.
hi Andra. How
Hi,
are you
Vladi.
doing? How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's one of my first weeks, actually the second week here in Oxford. So I'm trying to learn a bit about the place and find my way around.
That's very
Yeah.
exciting. So you are on
Yeah.
your fellow research journey.
Yeah.
We'll get to all of that, but I wanted to welcome you on the Future Farm and our founder stories. The audience knows that we are trying to sort of unpack the vulnerable parts of the journey of becoming a founder or being a founder and entrepreneur. And I was especially excited to do this together. We share a part of history, which I'll get into. But there's a lot that you can share with the wider community. So I wanted to sort of appreciate that you're brave to do this with us, and let's see how naked we'll get together on this session.
Let's try.
Let's do it then. So maybe let's start. Could you just briefly introduce yourself to the folks, and what is it that you're currently doing? I know it's not an easy one, but let's see what doors this will open.
I'm a Romanian, British Romanian, let's say. I live in the UK for 20 years already. I worked in banking a lot, and somehow, if I want it or not, this seems to define me somehow, or this is how people know me. In the process, I collected lots of problems which fascinate me and somehow direct me in choosing what I do. So at the moment, I do research at the University of Oxford, and I'm trying to finish my PhD at the Warwick University, and I'm still involved in the startup I work with until recently full time. Their journey is very important to me, so I cannot let it go. I still keep an eye on what's going on. So I do quite a number of things.
And I think that's a beautiful sort of segue, because people, you might be asking, like, why have we invited Andra on the Entrepreneurial Naked series? And so let me clarify this. So I think it's about it probably is about 4 or 5 years back, years ago, that we have met, and this was in London. You were making what I've seen at that time, a major leap from your more corporate career, professional career. You had a sort of massive, solid experience of understanding financial services and how the banking world works. And you also, I remember, understood where are sort of some of the struggles and gaps, and you were ready to address them. And you applied for what I, at that time, have been building and designing, which was the Anthemis Fellowship. So it was sort of, for you guys out there, it's a fintech fellowship for early stage founders. And I remember this selection process that you went through, and it was, for me personally, it was very exciting to have you part of the cohort. And I mean, there were all kinds of reasons why we said yes to you. But since then, I've been following your journey, and people will know that in Future Farm, we define entrepreneurship also much wider than sort of the usual limited box. So through our eyes, you are a solo entrepreneur, portfolionist, whatever box you want to give it, but you wear a lot of hats, and you had to, which you did, you stood up on your 2 feet and apply the entrepreneurial mindset, and the journey follows the similar sort of tracks than, let's say, some more conventional, let's say, entrepreneurs that build teams, etc. So let's go there. The moment that we've met, for me, I've already at that time had a lot of questions, like what it takes for a person to make that leap from, it was about what, 20, 25 years in banking, 20, comfortable, secure job in some sense. I'm generalizing, but that's how people look at it. To do that leap, you were a mother of two and you applied for a 6-month unsecure fellowship to become an entrepreneur. Please do unpack this for us.
So I think if you spend 20 years on something and you're still you still maintain your sanity somehow, at least the way I see it is that there is something that interests you in it. It has been something intrinsic, let's say. You search for something in that domain where you operate. At least in my case, it doesn't work with repetitive jobs and so on. How my mind works. So in 20 years in banking, working especially in consulting companies, I have seen probably all the banks in the UK. I have been inside these banks as a technologist. And sometimes I build systems for these banks. Sometimes I run projects for these banks, integrating various things. Sometimes I advise them on strategy, all sort of, let's say, points of entry in these banks. And what surprised me, especially at the beginning in banking, was that people don't have an understanding how that bank works. If you go in another industry, people would explain, oh, this is what we do, this is how we work. In a bank, nobody would understand. And really, my mind, I think, was working in parallel to build this model of what these banks are all about. How do they work? Now, after 20 years of figuring out how the banks work in the end, but realizing that there is a commonality of problems in all these banks I've seen, and also figuring out that we are recycling the same type of thinking in banking. The way it works in London, at least, people move from one bank to the next and they stay almost in the same layer, functional layer of the bank. So if you work in mortgages, you stay in mortgages. If you work in IT, in credit risk, you will be in credit risk, in HSBC, in Barclays, in RBS, everywhere. So people get specialized in various things, which is a good thing, yeah. But they don't once they don't put it together, and secondly, they don't bring from outside any new types of thinking and ideas. It's extremely difficult to penetrate this wall. So I thought, okay, after 20 years, I've been a consultant. I worked in the banks. I worked in the banks in IT and in business. I've been a consultant in technology and in business. I worked in innovation labs in IBM and in Lloyd's. And we are not tackling the problems that I thought are important. So then I thought, okay, I have 20 more years. What of work? Do I want to spend them doing more of the same? I mean, moaning, oh, it doesn't work, oh, it doesn't. No, I would like to see, okay, can I, if I were to say from all this experience, what do we need to untackle next, to tackle next, to untangle, next, I think it would be this area, and which was my let's say my pitch when I joined Antemis, and this was a drive. It was looking backwards, looking forwards. Do I want more of the same? No. What drives me? What drives me is to understand pattern problems and try to do something about them. And this is what made me jump. I would say what I valued the most was my time. What do I want to do with my time? Because time is precious. It's not just the salary that I obviously need from somewhere, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it sounds very introspective. And I'm curious if you can maybe unpack that a little bit. You also brought a sort of a thought of mortality to me nearly, like thinking about, it's the concept of time that you're thinking of, like how much more do I have here? And I remember one podcast with, he was also a financial services consultant, and he was saying the same. I was like, he was counting how many weeks does he have potentially if everything goes well. And he said that completely kicked him into his butt. And he sort of allowed him to make maybe for some people more radical sort of shift. So it all sounds like the intrinsic motivation, introspection, so going deeper into yourself. Do you remember whether there were any sort of fears that were holding you back to do that shift, that were contrary to that strong inner drive?
The fear for me was mainly financial security.
Okay.
And I know that this is a fear for many who have normal jobs, let's say. It's not like or at least in my case, it was not like I have somewhere a huge or some backup or anything. It was just okay, I have 6 months to do something about it, but that's about it. It's not a lot, 6 months. So I knew that I can do the 6 months. I didn't know if I can do more than that. And those 6 months could mean a little or a lot. So basically, it was the only time in my life, even after I started to do research, when I could think about one problem in my own way, in my own time. It was not only that the fellowship gave me this freedom, but I gave myself permission to explore this problem in without constraints, trying to understand it and see what I can do about it. Of course, I was not all over the place. I think I've met over 100 people in those time in that time, and I spoke with them about what I was doing, what I was thinking. The fear was okay. I have 6 months, maybe nothing comes out of it at the end. But
yeah, this is powerful what you are saying in terms of two things stuck with me that I want to repeat. One was I gave myself the permission. And I think that is powerful, because I think a lot of times we look for sort of acceptance and permission from outside, and we don't start from within, right? To go on that journey and allow yourself. So I think that's profound. And the other part is around, I knew I will be able to find a job.
Yeah.
Was that what gave you sort of the feeling of, okay, if anything, I can lean back on something, or people even say lean forward. Was there something else that allowed you sort of to balance the uncertainty of that step?
I think it was also a certain level of maturity, I would say. Feeling confident in my ideas and what I was seeing. So I think this is one of the difficult parts in entrepreneurship, but also in research. So there is a commonality between the two. You start with something that you see and others don't see. and you think that that's a problem which needs to be solved or studied or something. But you're like a preacher in the desert at the beginning. Nobody understands what are you talking about. Why this? Why are you obsessing about this thing? It's too big, it's small. It's not real. It's not real, because usually you see pattern, you see things going in a certain way, and for whatever reasons, either because you're specialized in that, or either because you have a tendency to look into the future time horizon and see, okay, how things might play out and so on. But yeah, this confidence, you know what, I there is something to that. I know that others don't see it. I see it. I think it deserves my time. Something like that. Yeah.
That's beautiful. You know, I was reading one of your blogs, and I want to connect the dots. I'm going to read it out. You were giving an interview to a Software Craft podcast, and you said that the fact that the author, the producer, whatever we call him, host, called you into that podcast, you said that was surreal. Even if I did build systems, now I do program only for my PhD. Am I an imposter? I do think in systems. Is it true? It is true. And this is what I did all my life. So you've had on since Antemis, so you graduated successfully, you went on the journey, right? So afterwards, you didn't go back to the corporate life, you entered the research sort of path, but you also started consulting, you got on your 2 feet as an entrepreneur in our sense. And this question came up. So what's your relationship and what that question means to you today or on your journey? Am I an imposter? Because that's something we come across quite a lot as entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So it has a lot to do with my profession, which is changing a lot. So when I started my career, let's say, I started as an SAP consultant. I was in the world of software. So, for example, I'm very connected to the domain-driven design community, which is a beautiful community of technologists and software creators, and many of them are hand-on software developers. And I'm not anymore. So I write code really just for my PhD, and it's of a different nature. It's data science with a purpose. Let's say I have a question and I program for that. So it's bizarre. It's strange for me when people still search me for or want me to advise them on things and on technology. Sometimes I think, yeah, but there are so many others who basically know the most recent technology. So what exactly they need from me. It's true that I understand the problem. It's true that I understand the context. It's true that probably I could say what works, what doesn't work, and so on. But I cannot tell them anymore, as I used to. You should use this or not that. This interface is not good. You should use this other integration pattern. I'm not so up to date with the pace the technology functions. So then, am I an architect or am I not an architect anymore? What this means? Okay, I'm not that. What am I? Professionally, what am I? I'm not a software developer. Yeah, I program and I used to, but I don't. Am I an architect? I don't have all the bricks. It's like you have a Lego box, and I don't know most of the bricks which are part of technology production nowadays. So can I advise on that or not? Yes, I know business models in fintech and all these things, and I understand what's out there, what the problems are. Does this have a name? I have no idea.
Yeah, but it sounds like that the pressure to identify yourself as a box in a way comes from outside rather than from you. So it feels like that imposter syndrome feeling that if it happens comes because the outside world needs to put you in a box, and they've put you because they read your bio or LinkedIn. So how are you? Are you? Have you find your peace with it, or like how do you work with that tension of the expectation of the outside world from the freedom that sounds like you are creating for yourself inside of yourself?
I don't have a problem with it. It's true that I don't feel a lot of pressure. It's just that when I have to say what I do, it doesn't have a name. Mm-hmm. So it's more, I don't have a problem with defining myself into a box. Mm-hmm. It's more when I need to explain what I do, I need many words. Mm-hmm. That's not. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So maybe the way around it, and this resonates also with me sometimes, and particularly if you have a sort of everything but a narrow journey, is to go with the flow and react in that specific moment and try to understand sort of who sits on the other side. I want to come back to sort of you as for me, you represent such a mix of identities. And I'm going to unpack the ones that I'm aware of, okay? And I would love to sort of understand a little bit the relationship of those identities of you with regards to your overall well-being and mental health and emotional health. So I've learned just before we started recording, I knew that you migrated from Romania. I didn't know that there were a number of stops. So you shared with me that you migrated 3 times before you arrived to UK, and it became one of your homes. So the sense of belonging, right, that we sort of thrive for, it's an interesting topic to maybe unpack. You're a woman in financial services, research, and many other industries that naturally we still sort of look at, and they don't have a heavy representation of women. You're a mother of 2. You're very vocal about your hearing impairment, and those are just few. Maybe the last one, not to miss, and we unpacked it already a little bit, is that you entered the entrepreneur journey in the later stage of your life. And for a lot of people, the ageism is also something that holds them back to really sort of flourish. So have any of your identities, the ones that I mentioned, or some that I missed and I'm not aware of, have they been in some way a blocker, or have they been a root cause of, let's say, mental and emotional struggles on your journey as Andra? And as you know, we're not going to box you, but I'm going to use the word entrepreneur.
The difficult part, there are many difficult parts about immigration, but one which I think has an impact over emotional and mental health of somebody is that necessarily the culture is different from the one you're coming from. Doesn't matter how close you think that culture is to your country of origin, the culture is very different. And at least for me, if I were to describe the process, it was a process of decomposition. At the beginning. It was like, oh my, you find out what you're made of, and you figure out that some of the pieces are you, Andra, and some of the pieces are cultural. This is what we used to believe in my country of origin. This was valuable there, it's not valuable here. This was okay there, it's frowned upon here, and so on and so on. So you this process of learning what you are made of, it's painful, because it doesn't come to you in stages or in a planned way. It comes to you and it could rip you apart, unplanned. Yeah, sometimes too hard, sometimes nothing happens, but it's an aggressive process. And then you recompose yourself. So it's I would say it's a pretty fast process, but in normal times. But you recompose yourself in some pieces, and it happens that. So first I emigrated to Italy, then to Germany, then to the UK. In an interval of 3 or 4 years, this happened. And what I can say is that while you learn how to do it, it's not easier. None of, the third immigration doesn't become easier because you had other 2 before, because the decompositions happen anyway. The third culture is different from the second, from the first, and from your native one. So that's hard. That's one of the hardest things I've done. And when I immigrated in all these three countries, the immigration regimes were not friendly. So it's not like, it was not the typical immigration within Europe, where you can just move to another country normally, and that's so wonderful. But it was aggressive usually. It was like, no, we don't want to give you this visa, and no, we don't want to give you a visa, and no, you cannot take your child with you, and all sorts of no. All administrative, all bureaucratic. So for me, all this was to find a place where me and my son Andre, who was 4 at the time, to find a country which would accept us. And believe it or not, at the time, UK was the one which was most open. For this, I love this country very much. I understand what happened to it with Brexit.
How did this? Thank you for sharing. How do you think, or how do you look at it today, that this experience has sort of shaped you and formed you to who you are today? And you seem, from outside, that you are composed, and like, I got to know some parts of you, and I understand now that maybe some pieces of you have stayed somewhere else, or you have built some new and stuff. So how this experience have shaped you for, and the strengths that you have to do what you do today, which is to create value for the world and society, and being pioneering in, with some sort of thinking, you are thinking about accessibility of financial services as well, etc., etc. So is there an impact? Is there a relationship in any way?
First, I think I pay attention to others because of my own experience. I'm very sensitive to other human experiences where people encounter all sorts of barriers which have nothing to do with them, with who they are. They're completely artificial, and I see more, I would say. I developed a lens also through various cultures, and speaking and learning these languages, and speaking, trying to understand how they work. It's I would not recommend it as an experience, but it made me
mindset that you have, right? And the ability to see challenging situation with the parts that are actually driving your growth, and that are actually pushing you forward as a human being or a professional, etc. I think that's pretty unique, because very often what we see is the opposite, right? So we focus naturally, our mind focuses a lot on the negative aspects, and we are sort of looking on the challenging parts. What else? I want to sort of dig deeper into the sort of differently abled aspect of your identity and the hearing impairment. But before we go there, what's your support system? Because it's clear already, and I'm sure the people who are watching, listening will agree with me, that your journey had a lot of it's very lot of curves, and a lot of sort of mountains to climb, and whatever perspective you put onto it. Where do you, and how do you reach to that inner power of you? I know you do right. So I would probably have an assumption naturally that maybe that's a place where you go and connect with yourself in the writing, but I'm not sure if that's true, one. And second, what else is there that you tap into?
Ah, um, I don't have a description ready, let's say, or probably I don't even have an understanding of it. I think I was raised to be self-reliant. It was an expectation in my family. So my parents both were engineers, and I have a brother, and there were lots of discussions about cars, engines, things like that, which I involved myself in from the beginning. And they never treated me like, you're a go do something else while we're talking about cars. So I don't know if I had a boy education somehow, simply through the environment in the house. But for sure, nobody told me that somebody will ever take care of you or do something for you, or you could have any help. I didn't even have an idea that somebody could help me in any way, or I can ask for help. So I just went through life, for good or for bad, and the immigration reinforced this, or made it to grow exponentially. It's just up to you. It's just up to you. You have to find how to go through whatever situation you are in, you and your family. And in terms of support, in the early years here in the UK, I had my parents who from time to time would come and take care of Andre, which is extremely important. I have a motivation somehow not to let my kids down, they still have to have, or that they have a mother who is there for them and so on. And this keeps me going. In terms of, I think one of the things that I learned to do, and I remember that I shared this with you at the time, was to look for ways which somehow restore me to myself emotionally, and as it happens, I travel alone a lot of time. It might seem weird, I don't care.
I don't think it does. I think there a lot of people actually admire people who are able to do it. I think even I do, in terms of that. I look up to people more as it's inspirational. But yeah, please go on.
So there is something in finding yourself really somewhere on a point, on the map. You cannot even put it yourself, the point on the map. Nobody knows where you are, because, let's say, signal or whatever. And you are surrounded by smells which are very different, colors which are very different, people who look very different from you. Everything is different from your normal, and you just walk. and there's something in that for me, and this could happen anywhere. And this helped me a lot during the lockdown. Just the memory of, I don't know what street in Malaysia, I don't even know where it is, or a forest near Brisbane, or a lake in the Rockies, or these were the things which would come back to me during lockdown, when I didn't leave the living
when my therapist told me similar thing, because I shared with her when I'm in Pakistan that I miss the ability to just open a door and go without, you know, the freedom of just going and on your own and stuff. And she said,
Yeah.
you can create that moment just by sitting on a bench and looking at the vastness of the skies. And for me, it was like, first is like, nah, I'm not sure if that will work. But then actually, so I hear it did work. It did work. So you can, I think it's a powerful concept in terms of like, you can create that moment and you don't necessarily have to be in Malaysia. You can sort of recreate that for yourself wherever you are. It also sounded as if you are, and I don't know, this is more how I'm understanding what you said, is finding yourself in that connection with the wider humanity or something bigger than yourself. And
Yeah.
that resonates, you know, as a way maybe even to ground yourself and reconnect. Yeah, a bit striking. So at the Future Farm, we believe that entrepreneurship is a path that hopefully is, we try to contribute to the option that it's open to anybody and all parts of us. But we know by facts that, you know, it is still a pretty homogenous industry at large. And the one aspect that your identity also brings in and represents the being differently abled. And I know that you and I talk about your hearing impairment and you are quite vocal about it. And I have this part that I want to read again, if you don't mind, which you said in one of your blogs again. I learned that most people do not declare their disabilities to their employees for fear of being discriminated or penalized. Because of this, they're effectively excluded from many activities, trainings not available to people with dyslexia, or various learnings or visual disorders, company events not available to deaf people, etc. I know this talks about employees, but I would love to hear from you your own personal experience as an entrepreneur and somebody who is, you know, driving your path in this world. How this part of you have impacted the journey and how it impacts your well-being overall.
Yeah, I think this is an important part, and I have to say that I realize that it's important only quite late in life. So I have not always been deaf. So I became deaf at 29. I was in Germany for, I don't know, emigrating to Germany for probably 6 months or less. And I got a virus. And as we know, because we live in a pandemic, viruses attack people in different ways. And many people could have the same thing and they are okay afterwards, and others are not okay. Unfortunately, we will see this a lot after COVID. So I found myself at 29, a consultant for KPMG in Germany, in Frankfurt, and deaf.
Wow.
Not completely deaf, but I lost the high frequency sound completely, which is typical for this type of attack, let's say viral attack. And this affects the clarity of speech, so which means that you hear most things that, but in certain languages there are sounds which are not clear for you anymore. It doesn't matter how well you speak the language. And I didn't wear hearing aids. I thought, no, I tried. I thought, oh, that's weird. I'll manage my environment, which is one of the things which are recommended to deaf people. You have to manage your environment. Be in a quiet place when you have a conversation, tell people to face you, wear headphones, whatever, a lot of things. I was not even very much aware of that, but I thought I will, I don't know, stay there in the front, ask people to repeat, I'll do something. So imagine that after that, I went and started an MBA at London Business School. I was like, oh, I just got deaf. Let me do something. Let's get a lot of that. Move to a new country with a kid and Anyway, so it's not that I was in denial. I thought, okay, that means it's hard to accept that your life will be different from now on. That's the most difficult thing. So I think it took me a while to process this. And then I worked, and I think professionally the influence was that I would search to work in small groups where you are a master of the topic. So basically, if you know the vocabulary and if you know what we are discussing about, you understand better what is going on. If somebody starts talking to me now about I don't know, a topic I have no idea about, chances are that I will miss some words simply because I'm not familiar with how they sound when I don't hear them. So it influenced this. It became very difficult for me when the work moved into conference calls in IT, and you would have those meetings with 30 people where I couldn't differentiate because of my disability. I couldn't differentiate who is speaking. I would have 3 Scottish guys in a call, and I would be like, who is who? I have no idea. or
yeah, but this is important.
Various regional accent. I was not aware, honestly, of any discrimination for a long time, but on this first, because I can still operate pretty well. When the discrimination appeared, it appeared when I started declaring that I have a hearing loss.
Okay.
And why this is happening, or why I think it's happening, because people don't understand how you do it. It's not that all of a sudden you don't function anymore. It's like, no, you cannot possibly, do well because you're deaf. And the experiences I had in this, when people started making comments, and they were quite okay, upsetting is one thing, but I was so amazed at the human range. Let's say I didn't experience before. I was asking myself, where people come with this. It's one thing for me to say, look, I don't hear, I need this and that, or it's something else for somebody to make an assumption about you that you cannot do this or that because you're deaf. And by the way, this happened also in combination with the fact that they would say, I was literally said, told, Andra, because you're a mother and because you're deaf, you cannot perform as well as we expect from you. And they was like,
wow.
Yeah, exactly. And I was on the phone in Zurich in a hotel because it was after work, and I was working in Zurich. And I said, look, do you realize that we are having this conversation on the phone? And do you realize that I'm here for 8 months and my kids are in London? What are you talking about? And as shocking as it was, it was the realization that people project certain things, what they believe this would happen. Oh, my wife stays at home and blah, blah, blah. How could you do this with 2 kids? It's not your business, man.
Yeah,
I do it.
Yeah. Instead of digging deeper and exploring and being, with that openness and question and inquiry, we apply our own experiences and judgment and biases.
Yeah.
It's powerful what you said on the awareness, because that was the part I wanted to ask you, because I thought that leading with the awareness, informing people, right? I mean, it's not to all have all the burden on you, because I feel like this is a joint responsibility of, me being able to ask and respect, and then sort of, try to adjust, as well as, if possible, for you to help me understand. So how do you look at it today? Because you mentioned that, the discrimination started appearing when you actually started being open about it, which is completely, I mean, in some way, I can see how that is happening, but it's contra any logic or, you know, like, so yeah. So what's your modus operandi about it these days? And if there are some people listening that, you know, and it can be different aspects of us, of our identity, that maybe we don't feel comfortable or safe to be fully ourselves and being open about it. How do you as Andra look at it today, sort of with who you are, all of those parts of you?
I looking back, I recognize that it takes a certain amount of courage to talk about it. Simply because at the beginning, when I started recognizing that I'm deaf, after I don't know how, or that's part of who I am, I couldn't even say it because I would have tears flowing. And I was angry with myself. Why I'm crying, man? It happened. What's the problem? You know, don't cry, Andra. Come on. You just want to communicate the fact. So I said, okay, I will persist through crying and through tears, and I will say it. And after a while, you don't cry anymore. Okay, fine. Also, with the awareness, it's one thing that I'm more aware about my own disability, and I communicate it very often. To compare, I would say, is like coming out. You know.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about that. Yes.
But you come out every damn day, five times per day. You go to the train station, they announce, I don't know, something, blah, 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 blah. No way to figure it out. I have a mask, the guy has a mask. I go to him, I'm deaf. And you have to be willing to say it anytime, or you go in a cab and the cab driver start talking whatever about his wife, his daughter. You tell him, sorry, I'm deaf. So you say it in many circumstances when normally you wouldn't need to say it. But about the awareness, where I developed a muscle for this. When I work in Lloyd's, in the innovation lab of Lloyd's in digital. First, by the way, in the women chapter or identity, I think it was just one other woman in the whole building, which was approximately my age. But I said, okay, I was trying to figure out what to do about this conference call things, because it was difficult for me. And I said, look, I want subtitles. This is a technology, blah, blah, blah. I spoke with others from other banks who have this problem. I just, can we get this reasonable adjustment for me? No, we couldn't. It was not possible, whatever. It was not possible. But in the process of trying to figure out for myself, how do you obtain a reasonable adjustment, which nowadays it's so basic, captioning for it's, yeah. I said, okay, I'll write this process so anybody else who has the same problem, trying to figure out for their own how to claim, how to ask for support to have an adjustment identified. And because I put that on the intranet in Lloyd's, many people started contacting me. People who didn't have visible disability, people who had visible disabilities, and some guys invited me to the call center of Lloyd's. And in that call center, I met deaf people working in the call center with dyslexia. And I saw their setting for work and so on. And I was in so much awe because they needed so little in terms of adjustment and from their physical adjustment. But from their side, what they could do to operate in that level where somebody calls you, different voice, different accents, where they look to read the script with dyslexia. And I've seen there lots of such cases. I thought, wow. Then I've met people who couldn't do the trainings, the mandatory trainings, because they changed to whatever video fancy things which was rotating like that, and it couldn't be read by the scripts for people with visual and so on and so on. So I met a diversity of people who were not visible anywhere, because you do not have to declare your disability. I met other people who have other sort of deafness, and because this is a very diverse phenomenon, we are not all deaf in the same way. They spoke about their shame, and I was like, shame? Why shame? You know, and all this, and I thought, you know, if at least I gain the ability to talk about it without crying, at least I will tell these people's stories when I can.
I think the stories that you shared, it's amazing, like how very little of a practical adjustment, right? When the mindset is right and you're up for it, and that, you know, the system around you adjusts, and that's very little, the enablement, massive. And the ability to sort of equalize the opportunity and possibilities. Thank you for sharing. You know, there were a few things that came up. I was just I am reflecting on this whole conversation, and, you know, the one word that is sort of a buzzword, but I'm going to use it. Hopefully it's going to sort of be more grounded in this context, but it's the anti-fragility. It just, you know, in a way that we talk quite a lot about resilience on the podcast, and people will know, but I feel like in some of your experiences, not only have you sort of came back to the place where let's say the hardship hit you and you were able to stand through it, but I feel like with that mindset of yours, and you share that probably the root cause or is also the way you've been raised as one of the sort of principles that impacted you, allowed you to grow into another level of yourself. And I think that's very inspiring. I'm so glad that we managed to do this together, and we opened a lot. A lot of sort of, you know, boxes and doors and concepts, and I think we could have gone much deeper and for much longer, but I think it's very important that we did it together, and hopefully it's valuable for the people who are out there. And is there a way how, if there's anybody listening or watching right now wants to connect to you, or, you know, maybe write you a thank you note or have a question, is there a way they could connect with you?
So I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. They can connect.
Awesome.
Find me there.
So Andra Sonea and we'll put it into the notes of the show, so you guys can find it there, and use the channel. Thank you so much, Andra, as well, and really sort of excited for you that you are embarking on this new chapter with the research, and wearing many hats, and that we can sort of, you are a friend of ours and of the Future Farm, and thanks for the contribution. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for the discussion.
You've been listening to Naked by the Future Farm, where entrepreneurship is stripped to its vulnerable core. To learn more about our work, sign up to our newsletter or visit thefuturefarm.co, where you can also apply to be a Naked guest. And remember, subscribe, follow, and rate Naked to help share it with the world.